everyone, and welcome back to another review of an episode of The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I'm your host, Scribelight. Hope everyone's doing well. I just got done watching episode 5, which is just called Truth. In my opinion, it should have been called Capture the Flag. But we'll get to that as we go. Hope everyone's doing well this morning. A few quick hellos, and then we'll dive right in. Corey Suzuki, PCY01, Funtime Bats, Zalbla, Mr. Yes, the Magister, Non-Vitae Rex. Hello to you all. All right, so I actually took some detailed notes this time to help me along in my memories as we go. And here we go. We open up with John Walker running into a warehouse in Latvia just after having beaten to death and or decapitated one of the flag smashers with his shield. John Walker now, of course, being souped up with the super soldier serum. I'm assuming he went to this warehouse chasing the flag smashers, I guess, but he gets there and it's empty, and then Bucky and Sam show up. So it seemed like he just ran to this warehouse so they could have a fight, which they do. And the fight is, okay. You know, if you set aside the ridiculousness of the events that led up to this, them having the fight makes some sense. But I found myself doing a lot of work as the viewer to inject a lot of meaning into the actions taken by the characters. The importance of the shield as a symbol was, I understand the significance of the shield, but they're really putting a lot of oomph into it over like the actions of John Walker. Bucky and Sam being like all, I don't know, reverent over the shield. Yeah, I get it, but it's just a thing, it's just a symbol, if that. So I don't know. They haven't sold me on that over the course of these episodes. Now, seeing Sam's emotional reaction to the shield means something more, because in the context of the events, if he had taken the shield, if he had taken the mantle of Captain America, then the John Walker thing would not be taking place. Maybe things would be different with the whole flag smashers thing. Maybe he could have gotten through to Carly, etc. He's got all this guilt and this burden on his shoulders that he made a mistake. Okay, I get it. Fine. Anyway, they have a fight in this warehouse, and it is a knockdown, drag out. It's kind of cool-ish, and John Walker really throws down with these guys, and he even gets it over on Bucky. He tears off Sam's wings. It's pretty terrible. And then all of a sudden, of course, they overpower him, take the shield. Okay, and apparently just completely dislocate and or break John Walker's arm, which, in the course of being a super soldier doesn't mean much. He'll heal up pretty quick. Okay, all right. So that had to happen. We had to get the shield back into Sam's hands at some point. And so they basically just rip it out of John Walker's hands. Then we're back at the scene of the crime, back where I guess Lamar got killed, Battlestar in the last one. And now the soldiers are all around. The U.S. soldiers, I guess the international force that supports the GRC. And Sam and Bucky are just there in this, house, this building or whatever. And Torres shows up again. If you don't remember Torres, I don't know that I've mentioned him in the course of the reviews because he hasn't shown up since maybe episode 2. Torres was sort of like Sam's wingman, for lack of a better phrase, and sort of adjunct or liaison or whatever to the U.S. military. So Torres is there, and Sam and Bucky sort of say, well, what are we going to do now? I don't know. What are you going to do? And then Bucky says he's going to leave, and then Sam's like, are you going to go after Zemo? And Bucky's just like, yeah, whatever. Because Bucky knows where Zemo is all of a sudden, I guess. But here's the thing. So Sam and Bucky, the entire time throughout the course of this show, have been operating off the book. They didn't have authorization to spring Zemo. They didn't have authorization to do anything that they've been doing. And yet they're just kind of standing around with these military guys and these representatives of the GRC like nothing's happening. So the whole idea that they've been doing it their own way and this kind of, it's like, okay, well, if there are no consequences to them operating as rogue agents, what's the significance of them operating as rogue agents? There's nothing. So they're just kind of standing around. And Sam is sitting there in this room with his broken wings in a bag and the shield just laying there on the table. Okay, the shield that is the holy grail of this entire show. And it's just sitting there. And Sam just picks it up and walks away and leaves the wings behind with Torres. So the shield, which was a museum piece just a few episodes ago, which is this big symbol, which is this big, valuable prized possession, which is this thing that Sharon Carter got put onto the blacklist and became a rogue shield agent because she stole Sam Wilson, who is not the custodian of this piece of equipment, of this grand item of power, just picks it up and walks out. In front of all the military guys, the GRC, the whole 9 yards. Okay, that'll become important for another plot hole, small or otherwise as it is. So anyway, then all of a sudden, John Walker is effectively being court-martialed, but not being court-martialed because they threaten him with court-martial. Anyway, he goes before this panel. He's all in his military regalia, all his awards, all his medals, the whole 9 yards. And they just tear him down at this deal. They say, you're no longer Captain America. And you're going to be given a, what would they call it, a less than honorable discharge. So he's out of the military, right? And they say he'll be receiving no benefits. And I'm like, wait a sec. Okay. No benefits for a 3-time Medal of Honor recipient. No benefits. So they're effectively just completely gutting him. It's not that you're not just Captain America anymore, and we're not going to totally take away all your awards and everything else, but we're just going to kick you out of the military and cut off all your benefits. And he makes a reasonable argument back to them that he did everything that was asked of him. He put his life on the line. He is a product of them, etc., etc. And they're literally just throwing him to the wolves. They won't prosecute him reasonably or otherwise for having killed this terrorist in public. And it's arguable about whether or not he was entirely unjustified, but it was pretty bad looking. But they're just going to cut him loose. Okay. And then they say, and return that shield. And I'm like, return the shield? Well, so Walker never was debriefed after what happened in Latvia. He never told them about his fight with Bucky and Sam. He never told them how he got his arm dislocated. What? And Sam, again, was just sitting there amongst all the GRC guys and the military guys with the shield, and that never got back to the brass? Return the shield. What? Real quick, thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people and scribbles. Hello, Kyle. Thank you so much. Okay, so all that being said, then Walker and his wife, who we haven't seen since I think episode 1 or maybe 2, I forget, they're sitting in the hallway afterwards and he's brooding. And all of a sudden, purple boots start walking up. And I'm like, oh, who's this? And then the camera pans up and it's a lady in purple boots and a purple trench coat and her hair is tinted purple. And it's Elaine from Seinfeld. Julia Louis-Dreyfus. And my first thought is, Victoria Hand? And I'm going to get into some deep comic book lore here because, anyway, there's a character called Victoria Hand in the comic books who was sort of the second in command of Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers. amongst other things. And she had a purple streak in her hair and that whole thing. She was portrayed in the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. So I thought maybe this is like the MCU's version of Victoria Hand, since Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is technically outside the MCU. Anyway, it's not Victoria Hand. No. It's Contessa Valentina de Fontaine. And who is Contessa Valentina de Fontaine, you might ask? Oh, she's just Madam Hydra. Yeah, she's just, the lady who would eventually become the head of Hydra in various ways. There's been several different people who have run Hydra over the comic books history, from Baron von Strucker to Red Skull. It goes on and on and on. Anyway, this character is at least in the comic books, is a former S.H.I.E.L.D. operative of some kind, a spy, but also better known as Madam Hydra, or the leader of Hydra in one iteration or another. And she just like sits down in between them and is like, hey, dude, I know you got done dirty, but there's a lot of people that find a lot of value in you. So here's my card, which is a blank piece of paper. Ooh, mysterious. And we'll be in touch. Yeah, so I don't know. And it was also, again, Elaine, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. This was the big reveal. Okay. I mean, there is the implication that eventually John Walker and several other minor supervillains like Zemo are going to be collected and turned into the Thunderbolts, which is sort of a, let's say, a Suicide Squad-like team, in that they're all made up of, minor bad guys, but portrayed as sort of heroes or used as such. I guess this might be an element to that. Don't know. Anyway, so then we cut back to Latvia. Back to the same location where all of the Flag Smasher Latvia stuff took place. And Carly and her group of Flag Smashers are just wandering around the remains after the GRC and the military have shown up to clean things up. So you have this terrorist organization, the Flag Smashers. You have the GRC and the U.S. military and God knows what else looking for Carly and the Flag Smashers. They've gone into the wind, except they haven't gone into the wind. They're still in Latvia, and they're just roaming around a crime scene, effectively, that apparently nobody is monitoring. Nobody would think they would come back to that place. But apparently they're just wandering in, all of them, in public, effectively, to reminisce or get all angry about what happened. Okay. And then they start complaining again. She starts complaining about how they're the victims. They have murdered people in a bombing. They have now killed Battlestar, which again, in the previous episode, somehow shocked their conscience for a moment. And then they ran away, even though their entire intention and the entire fight was to murder the people around them. But they kill one guy, and all of a sudden, that's a big deal. Still playing like they're the victims, Carly and her team. And again, this show has done a horrible job of trying to portray the Flag Smashers as even a gray area, sympathetic, whatever. Just horrible. And not only in the portrayal of their actions towards their ends, but also in the portrayal of the justification, whatever it is, for them doing what they're doing. It's just been poorly transmitted throughout this series. Thank you, Non-Vitae Rex. By the way, how does a 3-time Medal of Honor winner just go all megalomaniacal like that? Do they effectively foreshadow this turn at all? They do. They show him being, at various points, much more aggressive and short-tempered and frustrated in different points before he gets the super soldier serum. So very not Steve Rogers, more impulsive, more let's get the job done kind of thing. Less, let's say, emotionally restrained. So there are points at which, previous to him getting the super soldier serum, that he acts out in ways that are, it does foreshadow that. So, and I want to say something. The overall portrayal of John Walker, I don't have a problem. It's another one of those things where, you know, you have a show that all the surrounding bits and pieces are just completely messed up, but they do have some diamonds in the rough. It reminds me a lot of Billy Russo in The Punisher first season on Netflix, where they've created a very compelling villain, but he just happens to be placed within a relatively chaotic and nonsensical show. John Walker as a character isn't bad and isn't badly portrayed. I just want to say that first and foremost. Also reminds me kind of like Cottonmouth from Luke Cage season 1. You know, you create all these really compelling bad guys, villains that have some depth to them that actually by themselves could be really interesting, but then you put them in kind of wonky shows. And so there's that. So yes, it was transmitted before or foreshadowed before. And with the super soldier serum in the lore doing its job to amp up who you are at your core, it does make a certain amount of sense that he would lose it like that. And being all megalomaniacal, I don't know if I classify that as that he's maybe a product of his own, he believes his own press kind of thing to a certain extent. But you also see shades of him being doubting himself in different scenes. He's a very, thus, as far as I'm concerned, he's been portrayed as a very human character. He is not inherently evil, but he's just very human and flawed. And so, yeah, the character of John Walker I kind of like, more or less. He, unlike Carly Morgenthau, is a character that you can sympathize with to a great degree while also disagreeing with some of his decisions or actions. So he is a decently constructed character for the sake of this. Okay, we'll get into that more as we go. Anyway, so yeah, Carly and them, they go back to their little camp hideout and decry their being victimized and everything after they've murdered people, because they can't seem to just grasp onto that. But there is a sense, and it's not spoken, but just in the faces of her followers, that even they are starting to doubt her, I don't know, her fervent nature and all this, her sort of my way or the highway kind of thing, or even her pursuit crusade seems like it's sowing some doubt amongst her followers. Again, it's not spoken. It's just sort of in the body language of the actors and the characters around her. I don't know if there's anything to that. I don't know if I'm just projecting my hope that there's not this, we're all in this and lemmings who don't think about the consequences of what we're doing. But that's what I got from that scene. But also the nonsensical nature of, you have a international agency plus international coalition of military forces looking for these guys, and she never left Latvia, and they're all still there and they can't find her. Right. Okay, and then we jump off to Sokovia, where Zemo is standing in front of a memorial to Sokovia, which is a scene you see in the trailer all over the place. And Bucky has tracked him there. So Zemo went from Latvia to Sokovia without being tracked or found or anything. And Bucky just happens to know exactly where he is, because reasons, I guess. And Zemo says something to the effect of, I expected you sooner. It's like, okay. And then they have a little conversation, and Bucky is getting ready to kill Zemo. You know, because Zemo says there's only going to be one way to stop Carly Morgenthau, and you know what that is. You've seen it before. You know, he's going to have to kill her, is what Zemo says. And so Bucky pulls out a gun and aims it at Zemo's head. And Zemo seems to accept his fate. And Bucky pulls the trigger, and there's no bullets in the gun. And then Bucky holds out his robot hand and opens it up, and all the bullets fall out in this dramatic slow motion, whatever. And I'm just sitting there going like, what the hell is that supposed to mean? Like, is he saying, I'm not the killer you think I am or something? I guess. I don't know. It was very bizarre. It was overly dramatic and not earned in any particular way. Like, okay, so Bucky's not going to kill Zemo. And then the Wakandan secret police show up. 3 of our fully regaled, bald secret police ladies show up. And the one lady whose name I keep forgetting. But anyway, the main one. And they show up to arrest Zemo because either Bucky told them where he would be, or they also figured out where Zemo would be, or we're just going into, again, everybody knowing where everybody is going to be on the planet before they get there and show up. Because that's been a running theme throughout this entire show. Just, convenient arrivals. Always with the convenient arrivals. So these three show up, and they take Zemo into custody, and the main lady says, we're going to take him to the raft. Okay, now the raft is a Marvel Comics supervillain super prison. Okay, think of it as like the ultimate Alcatraz. We have seen the raft before if you watched Civil War, because that's where Sam and Ant-Man and the Scarlet Witch, that's where they were all taken and locked up after the Civil War events. And then Captain America shows up at the end to break them out. That's how Civil War leads into the division of the Avengers by the time we get to Infinity War. So let me just get this straight. All right, so Zemo, who blew up the UN and killed King T'Chaka, right? And remember now, King T'Chaka dying in the UN bombing, he was not the target of the bombing. The bombing was just Zemo using the opportunity to further fracture the Avengers and blaming that crime on Bucky. Okay? So, yes, he's responsible for King T'Chaka's death. He did not target King T'Chaka. Just, I want to make that clear, because they never mentioned the dozen other people that died at the UN. It's always just King T'Chaka. Anyway, so, just again, let me get this straight. So Zemo started out this entire show locked up in a supermax duper duper prison in Germany. All right? He was locked up. He was not going anywhere. Bucky and Sam break him out. Then the Wakandans want to bring him back in for him killing King T'Chaka. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking they want to bring him back in. They want to claim jurisdiction because they want to, like the Mossad or something, want to take Zemo back to Wakanda and put him on trial for killing King T'Chaka. That was kind of what I thought was going on this whole time. You know, they didn't have an opportunity to bring justice to Zemo because he was in international custody, effectively. But now that Zemo's out, they have an opportunity to exact justice the Wakandan way for him killing King T'Chaka, which he hasn't actually faced yet. But no, now that they've tracked him across the globe, right, from Wakanda to Latvia and now to Sokovia, after they were responsible for him escaping from Latvia in the first place by screwing around with Captain America and fighting him for no reason, now that they've got custody of him, they're just going to take him back to the raft, to effectively an international prison facility, right, that we already know Captain America broke everybody out of before. So we're not talking exactly the most secure location on the planet as established in the storyline so far. They did all of this to take Zemo back to the raft. Like, why? Well, what was the point of that? Bucky could have done that. Hell, John Walker could have done that. It doesn't make any sense. So, there you go. Suddenly they're going to start honoring jurisdiction after they came in the last episode and said, everywhere we go, we have jurisdiction. It makes absolutely no sense. But it certainly sets up the possibility for Zemo to be amongst a whole bunch of other minor supervillains that can be broken out at some point for use as the Thunderbolts or whatever, a la Arkham Asylum and the Suicide Squad. It just boggles my mind. Anyway, so then Sam has the shield, and he decides to go visit Isaiah Bradley again for reasons that are ephemeral at best. And he sits down and talks to Isaiah Bradley, and Isaiah Bradley effectively retells parts of the story from the comic books, the series called Truth, Red, White, and Black, which was a series that came out in the 90s, I believe it was. I think it was the 90s, late 90s, and sort of tells the story of Isaiah Bradley, technically the Black Captain America, and just as a review, the analogous situation for that comic book series was like the Tuskegee experiments. They were trying to recreate the super soldier serum and used black soldiers as the guinea pigs. And these experiments ended up killing several of these test subjects. But Isaiah Bradley somehow, for some reason, he survived the process and became a super soldier. And then a whole bunch of stuff happens with him, and he gets horribly mistreated by the government. And that's in the comic books. And that's, so he's just basically retelling the story of the comic books in a rough way. Okay. And that's fine. I'm still not quite sure what Sam is doing there at that point, but anyway, I guess he was looking for Isaiah Bradley's blessing or something to take control of the shield, or he was acting as an emissary to the legacy of the shield. I don't know. But in the course of this, we get another round of woke racial lecturing from Isaiah Bradley that nobody's going to accept a black Captain America. Their world won't do that. Their country won't do that. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white man shield, etc., etc. And like, okay, I get it. Okay, 500 years, etc. Okay. It was another, racial justice lecture in the middle of a comic book. Like, okay. Thanks. Moving on. We end up then back at Louisiana, where Sam has come home to see his sister, Sarah. I got her name right this time. Apologies for the last time. For some reason, I thought her name was Jennifer. Anyway, so he comes back home because they're going to fix that boat. They're going to fix that boat so they can get the business back going again, so they can start making money again and help the family. So I called this the raising a barn sequence. Now remember, Carly Morgenthau, the Flag Smashers, murderous terrorists, still on the run. But we're just going to, take some time to have a vacation back at home. Right? The entire thrust of this show is the emergency of stopping a group of rogue super soldiers from causing more damage and hurting people. But, gotta go home and deal with the family business for several days or a week or something. It can wait. The super duper terrorists, the whole thing, that can wait a little while. Thank you, Officer Buck. Hey, Snibbles. Hey, Buck. How's it going? So, yeah, I called it the raising a barn montage or sequence because Sam calls in a whole bunch of favors from the local community because his parents helped out people for years and years and years, and they all show up to do different bits to help fix the boat. And so also Bucky shows up to help fix the boat. And, as a sequence, as a montage of little events, little funny things and so on, it's okay. Nothing happens per se. You get some more camaraderie between Sam and Bucky, which I guess now we're not going to be contentious friends, or Bucky has forgiven Sam or something for taking back the shield and yada, yada. Also, Bucky shows up with a gift from the Wakandans, or a favor that he pulled with the Wakandans, and it's a big suitcase, a big techno suitcase. And what could be inside of that, you ask? Probably the new Captain America outfit. We don't see it, obviously, in this episode. We'll see it premiered in the last episode, but you know what it is before we get there. Anyway, so they do some back and forth, sort of, friendship making and sort of fence mending between the two of them. And some funny little moments, family things, Bucky flirting with Sam's sister and everything. It's fine. It feels completely out of place since we still have murderous terrorists on the loose, but all by itself, it's fine. Then we have a scene where John Walker goes and visits Lamar Hoskins' parents to sort of, extend his condolences. He tells them a lie. He tells them the guy he killed was the one that killed Lamar, which isn't true. But, he's trying to assuage their grief in a way to let them know that there was some kind of justice done. Even though I would have thought that the knowledge that he killed a guy who didn't actually kill Lamar would have been public domain by now, but maybe not. I don't know. And he kind of promises them that, he's going to keep fighting and everything else. And he gets told, like, Lamar was so proud of him for getting Captain America and so honored to be working with him and back and forth. And again, it's one of those scenes. It's like, okay, John Walker is not at his core, terrible person. He has friendships. He has loyalty. He has remorse and grief and everything else. He did something that was, demonstrably a bad move, murdering a guy in the middle of the street who was unarmed and had his hands up and everything and that kind of deal. But at his core, he's not a supervillain. He's not doing all of this because he's trying to get power. He's effectively trying to do the right thing, but sometimes making the wrong decisions. Again, human character, not a bad gray area villain to be had in a lot of ways. The dark side of Steve Rogers after a fashion. Okay. And I'm fine with that. So the scene worked in that sense to sort of further that idea. All right. And so then Random American says, so they just wasted Battlestar. Yeah, well, you see, I don't know. I'm hoping he gets resurrected, because that happens in these things, but I guess he's just dead. If he'd been like, ridiculously horribly maimed, kind of like Rhodey was in Civil War, but they fix him up and, technoize him kind of like Battlestar is in the comic books, maybe that'd be cool. I don't know. I hope they don't just get rid of him. I hope that there's a scene, an after credit scene somewhere, like at the end of the sixth episode or something, where he's on a table somewhere and he's got two metal arms or something. I don't know. I guess we'll see if anything happens. Anyway, all of a sudden, in case you forgot she existed, we suddenly cut to a scene with Sharon Carter. We get this sort of dolly shot down a hallway with all the art pieces and things, and Sharon Carter on a phone to somebody talking about getting them the things that they need or how much that they need, and then we cut to another painting, and that's the end of the scene. No context, has nothing to do with the rest of the episode. As far as I can tell, unless it's very opaque, and maybe it is, her conversation on the phone isn't directly related to any of the events taking place in the show, at least not this episode. Maybe it is and I missed it. I don't know. But either way, I think it's just telling us that the big reveal is going to be Sharon Carter is the power broker, which would be a big disappointment to me because I think that's just lazy. I think it makes a heck of a lot more sense that it was Arnim Zola or another supervillain. But unless it's a red herring, I have a distinct feeling that they're going to let us down again and that the fan theories are going to be way better than what they delivered to us. Because Sharon Carter, as the power broker, as the person who's been funneling super soldier serum and arranging all that for terrorist organizations, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But then a lot of this show doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so then we cut back to the boat. And we're still, everybody is sort of hanging out and not caring about the terrorists so much. But this is the scene where we see several of the shots that were prominent in the original trailers, with Sam and Bucky standing outside that house and sort of practicing with the shield and having this conversation about the shield has a legacy, that kind of thing. But there's this dialogue from Bucky to Sam. And he talks about how Steve Rogers and because he mentions that at the end of Endgame, he basically confirms that before Steve Rogers traveled back in time to disappear, he told Bucky what his plans were. So Bucky, and it was also kind of indicated in Endgame through body language, but so Steve had told Bucky beforehand that he was going to leave, go back in time, and then leave the shield for Sam. So Bucky says something to the, and I'm paraphrasing, he says, Steve and I didn't understand what it would mean to give the shield to a black man or have a black man handed the shield or something. And then Bucky apologizes to Sam for Steve deciding to give Sam the shield because he's black, I guess. It was totally bizarre. It was just out of the blue, totally bizarre. I mean, yeah. So I don't know what else to say to that, except it just did not fit. It was one more moment where we have to inject racial politics into this show when Steve handing Sam the shield had nothing to do with race. It was because Sam is Sam. But now we have to take 3 steps backwards and inject this racial guilt thing into it. Because reasons? I don't know. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. How long are these episodes? There's a lot of jumping around even for an hour. I know. Well, that's the thing. And I mentioned this, I think, last review. This show could have probably done with an extra 2 or 3 episodes. Because, especially in the third episode, they jam so many scenes jumping around, plot threads all over the place into 1 hour's worth of footage, effectively. Well, less because the credits take forever. Yeah, they could have done with maybe giving some of these plot lines room to breathe a bit more. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, they do jam a lot of stuff and they jump around all over the place a lot. That's what makes some of this storytelling very both hard to follow, but also very thin on consistency, and quote unquote realism for the sake of the progression of events. So anyway, so now during this scene where Sam and Bucky are having this conversation, they are in turn throwing the shield around and bouncing it off of trees, and each of them is then catching it one to the other, like effortlessly with just like perfect precision. It's amazing. It's really cool looking, right? So you can tell Sam has been practicing with this thing. He knows how to use it. Bucky obviously knows how to use it, and so on and so forth. It's, they're kind of playing catch. They really are playing catch with the Captain America shield as they bounce it off of these trees and precision and everything. Kind of odd, but it's also kind of a bonding moment, I guess. And then Sam gives Bucky a pep talk because he talks to Bucky about how, and we haven't even addressed this since like the first episode, but Bucky was attempting to make amends for his crimes as the Winter Soldier by either capturing the people that controlled him or trying to do good things or be supportive to victims of his crimes that may not know that he's the bad guy. Specifically, there is this man whose son that Bucky killed as the Winter Soldier, who Bucky has befriended, but is still not quite ready to confess to this guy that he was the one that took his son's life. And so he's just kind of floating on the periphery of that guy. And so Sam is like, hey, dude, you're trying to make up for your things. You're trying to do this stuff to make yourself feel good, right? To make apologies and all that. But you see, what you have to do is you have to make them feel good. You have to be of service to them if you really want to make amends. And it's not bad advice or anything. It's kind of self-help kind of thing. All right. But apparently Bucky didn't really see it that way. And he's like, that's good advice. And now they're acting far more friendly. I guess now all the conflicts have been washed away. I guess now they're just sort of like, buddy cop kind of thing, more so than before, when every instance they had to come up with a reason why they were still crabby at each other. I suppose Sam taking back the shield has healed those wounds. I don't know. But now they're friends. Okay. Then we go back to the boat again, and Sam and Sarah having a conversation, and Sam starts talking about his obligations as what he is. He starts talking about how, he did his best to undertake or respect, and I have it quoted here on my notes, our struggles as a people. Not our struggles as a family, but our struggles as a people. So now Sam is an avatar for a demographic. He's representative of a whole ton of people, not just his family, not himself, but out as a people. Okay. All right. One more. Let's all focus in on this stuff because we have to, because it's politically correct or whatever. Okay. And then in a very bizarre situation, we cut to a training montage, your classic training montage of Sam running and flipping and throwing the shield and not catching it. The fumbling. Like over and over again, we see him. I mean, it's a training montage. He's throwing the shield and he screws up catching it. And he ducks past it because he can't catch it fast enough. I'm like, shouldn't this scene have taken place before the scene where Bucky and Sam have that pep talk where they're throwing it back and forth to each other with precision and accuracy? Because it made no sense. We see Sam in that previous scene being very adept at throwing that shield around. And then all of a sudden, Sam is back to square one. So either at some point those two scenes were flipped, or that scene of Bucky and Sam having that heart-to-heart was some kind of like reshoot that they put in ahead of time. And I don't know. It was just very odd. But I mean, but taking it as its own thing, it's a training montage. You see him screwing up. You see him getting better. The end. Okay. Training montage. Ta-da. And not much more to say about it. I mean, if it all by itself, it was fine. Kind of generic, but there you go. And then we cut back to Carly Morgenthau and her Flag Smasher buddy. And they're sitting in a park somewhere. Okay. And I hear noises and sound effects in the background that make me think they're in the United States. Like there's a police siren, and it's one of those U.S. police sirens, not like the wee 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 you usually hear like in a European country or something. But anyway, so they're talking about what their plans are, and apparently the GRC, the Global Repatriation Council or Commission or whatever, they're getting ready to vote on what's called the Patch Act, I think it's called. And the Patch Act is meant to move refugees back to their home countries now that everybody has shown up back in the world after the snap was over with. So if I'm understanding it, and again, I think some of this has been peppered throughout the show, but during the 5 years that everybody disappeared after the snap, people migrated to places for refuge and or jobs and so on and so forth. And now the GRC, after this 5 years, is going to move people back to their home countries. Now, from what it sounds like, it's going to be a forced migration. I mean, that's the implication. It's not going to help people go back to their home countries and give them assistance if they want to. It's going to be just ripping people out of the places they've been living for the last 5 years and forcing them off into their home countries. I mean, that's the implication. It doesn't make any rational sense to me, but that's the implication of what they're going to do. And if that's what they're going to do, it sounds pretty bad. It sounds really stupid. In fact, it sounds so stupid that it doesn't even make sense for the comic book universe, but that's the implication. So anyway, they're going to have this big meeting at kind of a UN type deal. So this is happening, but Carly and her assistant are sitting in this park, and he's like, how are we going to take these guys down? And she's like, well, I got some help. And all of a sudden, we see a very familiar, for those of us that have been watching, purple-clad figure walking towards them. No, not the Countess. Batroc. Remember Batroc? Jacques Batroc? The guy who fought Captain America at the beginning of Winter Soldier, the guy who was at the beginning of this series. Very classic Captain America villain. And now he's back. And he's assisting Morgenthau by bringing her a suitcase in the middle of a park, a very significant park, we'll get there in a second, and just opening it up, and there's a bunch of weapons and guns and bombs in it and everything. Just in the middle of it, just right in the middle of everything. Okay, sure. All right. And then Carly's assistant, and I wrote this down. Carly's compatriot looks at her and says, "So we're working with criminals now?" And she says, "Haven't you heard? We are criminals." And I'm like, you bombed a distribution center and killed 3 people, and then you killed Battlestar. You guys are terrorists. What do you mean? So we're working with criminals now? What? I mean, just absolute and total nonsense. Nonsense. I mean, as far as I can remember, the guy saying this to Carly is the same guy who was shocked when the building blew up when they bombed it. But now he's suddenly coming to the realization, or he's not actually, he's completely oblivious to the fact that they are wanted international terrorists who have killed people. He was present when Battlestar was killed by Carly, with everybody getting their shocked faces on because somebody died in the course of them trying to kill people. But now it's like, now we're working with criminals? And then we pull back and we find out that we're in New York City. New York City? So Carly Morgenthau and all the Flag Smashers, they somehow, even though they are wanted internationally, even though the military, the GRC, everything else is looking for them, somehow they traveled from Latvia into New York City. New York City, which of all the cities in the U.S., and no system's perfect, but of all the cities in the U.S., that is certainly primed and ready and waiting to respond to any hint of terrorist activity, they got into New York City without any problems. And Batroc got into New York City with a suitcase full of crazy weapons without any problems. And Batroc is there only to kill the Falcon for having, embarrassed him, defeated him in the beginning of the series. That's the only reason that Batroc is there, because we know, or they're assured somehow, that Falcon will show up to whatever they've got planned, so that Batroc can get his revenge. Okay, sure. And then one of her her assistant, her partner in crime here, he asked something about, like, we need more people or something. This is going to be a big thing and whatever else. And she pulls out her smartphone and starts up the Flag Smasher app. And apparently this Flag Smasher app alerts anybody who is on side with them to suddenly start a flash mob. And everyone within sight in the middle of Central Park looks at their phones, stands up, and starts walking towards Carly because now they're all members of her army. Okay. Just, I mean, not that like the app controlled their minds or something. No, they were all just sleeper agents in waiting, ready to rise up and help out Carly. All these people sitting in Central Park having picnics and things. And there's a specific individual that the camera lingers on a couple of times for reasons we'll get to in a second. So then we cut to the GRC meeting. Let me make sure I got my timeline correct here, because I don't want to completely, so we're in the park, we're talking to them. Sorry, no, I jumped ahead slightly. So then we cut to Sam back in Louisiana, and he's watching the news, and they're talking about the GRC getting ready to vote on the Patch Act, I guess, because the GRC is now some quasi-UN thing. Anyway, and then Torres, remember Torres, Sam's wingman? He calls up Sam and says, "Hey, I got that analysis back. Yeah, so you see, there were all these signals from this app that was going off before any of the Flag Smasher actions in the past. Well, that thing just pinged in New York City." I'd like to, and I didn't do a review on the first episode, but for those of you unaware, in the very first episode, and one of the earliest things that we see this Torres character do, is he alerts Sam to the existence of the Flag Smasher app and or presence on social media with his smartphone. Okay. So him having known that, him having then leveraged that information to infiltrate a Flag Smasher flash mob in the first episode. Only now, 5 episodes in, does he draw a line between occurrences of the app being used as a precursor to action by the Flag Smashers. This information is only occurring to him now. This information is only suddenly new to us now. There was no way this could have been used as a warning. His own experience showing up at the flash mob in the first episode wasn't information that could have been used as a warning for other things. No, only now do we find this out. But yeah, it goes off in New York. And of course, Carly Morgenthau and all these guys, being such savvy individuals, didn't think that maybe them using a phone app or whatever wouldn't cause some problems. I tell you what, cell phones are one of the, and smartphones especially now, are one of the biggest defeaters of classic intrigue, espionage stories and everything else, because I can't count how many movies I've watched where they've had to come up with a reason or a mechanism to get rid of the cell phone or nullify its use in a scene or in a story because they just defeat so much. There was a, I forget, I think it was called House of the Devil or something, but I remember it was a horror movie from a few years ago that the writers set in the 1980s. And if I remember correctly, and if I'm mixing up my stories here, I apologize, but it still makes a lot of sense. If I remember correctly, one of the reasons that they set it in the 80s was because the existence of cell phones defeats a whole lot of the usual mechanisms of horror movies. It's difficult to be isolated and out of contact with the rest of the world if you've got a cell phone in your pocket, right? If you can't call for help, that's one of the things that has to be present for a lot of horror movies or isolationist horror movies. Cell phones kind of defeat that. So they specifically said it in the 80s to get around the problem of cell phones, at least in part. Anyway, so Sam sees this, and now he knows, something's going to happen in New York at the GRC meeting where they're going to discuss the thing that apparently... Why wouldn't this thing have ridiculous amounts of security to begin with? An international meeting with a known terrorist group on the run, a known terrorist group that is operating on social media, on and on and on. This thing's not going to have ridiculous security to begin with? No, because we cut to a scene of the GRC meeting in this big, conference room, all the screens and all that, techno stuff, and they're arguing over how to deal with the refugees, and they're not talking like diplomats or officials. They're yelling at each other and everything over things that you would think would have already been hammered out before the act was even put on the table, but never mind that. But then we see that one of the guys from Central Park who responded to the app is there, and he's actually employed as one of the security guys, and he does a couple of things, and suddenly all the lights are flashing red and everything is going crazy, and now this UN style in the middle of New York, in the middle of a town that's been the victim of terrorism in the past, in the middle of something that should be secured all to hell. One guy hits a couple of buttons and now apparently all's gone to bedlam. Okay, sure. And then we cut back to Sam, and Sam opens up his suitcase and looks down, and we get this Marcellus Wallace moment, and then it cuts to black because we're not going to see Sam's new outfit until the next episode. Then we get the credits. Almost there. Thank you, The Gay Rascal. Do I send a dog, cat, fox, or subvert expectations and send a hippo? Damn, here's a super chat. Dog, cat, fox, and what was it? Kabasan, the hippopotamus, which is kind of redundant, but there you go. Thank you, Gay Rascal. All right, so then we get the credits, and then we get a post-credit scene of John Walker pulling an Iron Man, in which he's doing the hammer on the anvil thing but he's making his own shield out of, I'm guessing, pig iron or something, like raw steel, or I don't know. But it is a segmented, circular layered shield that looks, I mean, I'm sure the final product will look better, but it looked pretty poor. And I've watched enough of those blacksmithing videos on YouTube now, watching him do that I was kind of like, that's going to be a pretty weak shield. I mean, yeah, I'm sure the final product will be all polished and everything, but it looked pretty bad. Anyway, so he's hammering out his own shield and spray painting it red, white, and blue, because he's going to, like, obviously go rogue and become Captain America again with his rinky-dink shield. And I'm sure he's going to show up at the event at the GRC thing in the nick of time, even though he doesn't have the resources or the intelligence or the authority or anything else that even Sam would at this point. But there you go. And that's how the episode ends. So again, as I put into the tweet that announced this stream, this episode in relative terms was not as bad or as infuriating or as nonsensical as the previous two episodes. But as I've outlined over the course of this hour, still a lot of problems, still a lot of loopholes, still a lot of, how does that work? Still a lot of social justice lecturing infused into places where it didn't need to be. The Isaiah Bradley situation is not entirely unjustified given the character's experiences. You know, his attitude towards everything, not entirely out of place. The problem is that in conjunction with the other instances in this show where out of nowhere, we start getting racial justice lectures. Like in the second episode where the police show up because, just out of the blue, no pun intended, because Sam and Bucky are arguing in the street, and then the cops act like the white security police and ask Bucky if this man is bothering you. And it was just so like, what the fuck? And then in this one, where Bucky is apologizing for Steve's decision to give Sam the shield because neither of them understood what it would mean to give it to a black man. So yeah, there you go. Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 5. The penultimate episode of this series. The final episode will be next Friday, where I'm assuming we're going to have the big throwdown with Sam in his new outfit with the shield as the new Captain America, having to fight the rogue Captain America, John Walker, I'm assuming. And probably the big revelation that Sharon Carter is the power broker. If Sharon Carter is not the power broker, if that was all red herring stuff and it turns out to be Arnim Zola or even the Contessa, hell, I'll take Madam Hydra as the power broker at this point. Yeah, I guess we'll find out and we'll see. Presumably also Bucky will finally come to terms with his guilt over having killed that guy and tell the father that he was the guy that took his son's life, and we'll see some resolution there. Yeah, so there's about 3 or 4 main story threads that still have to be resolved. Will they be done well? I don't know. I don't have a lot of hope, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, there are my thoughts on the episode 5 of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. What are your thoughts for those of you that have watched it, or just in general? Please leave your comments in the, comments section below. Let me know what you think. And yeah, I'm going to call it there. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate it. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find the both of us tonight on Satsu's channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we will talk about the news of the day, news stories you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and then your questions and comments. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.